his spirit shine in lives that are darkened by worry, doubt or fear. Strengthen and guide those who are trying to do what is right. Make it plain to them. Make us more mindful of the needs of our fellow men and less absorbed in the selfish concerns, that Christ may approve and bless what we do here this day. We ask these blessings in his name. Amen. Please be seated. Councillors, next item on our agenda are bereavements from 21st of May through to the 17th of June. And councillors, we mourn the loss of Ian Leslie Anson, John Anthony Thomas Holloway, Annie Jager, Joan Shirley Hawkins, Francis Horton Anderson, Helen Patricia Whalen, Sister Margaret Gleeson, Oscar John Roach, Laura May Kramer, Valerie Patricia Brown, Judith Rosemary Burns, and Desmond Noel Morton. Councillors and team, please stand with me, if you will, please, for a minute of silence as we pay respect to the deceased and extend our condolences to the family and friends of those deceased. Thank you. Please be seated. Our next item is those present and apologies. I believe we have 100% attendance from elected members and also from our executive team, Mr. Connor, is absent. Council, so we'll now move forward on to item number 5, which is confirmation of previous minutes from the ordinary meeting that was held on Wednesday, the 20th of May. I'll now call for elected member to move. That is not correct. Accepted. Thank you, Councillor Luke, and seconded by Councillor Moses. Councillor Luke, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Elected member who'd like to ask a question or speak against the motion? Councillor Moses, do you wish to speak to the motion?
No, Mr. Mayor.
In the case, I put the motion on favour. Against? The motion carried. We go on to item number 6, which is declarations of interest. At the moment, we have 2 declarations. I'll now call for any further 3 declarations of interest. I'll now call for any further declarations in relation to any part of the business paper for June. We have 3. First one being for Councillor Moses, relating to item number 10.2, Arts and Cultural Grant Funding, panel outcomes. Councillor Moses has listed his interest as pecuniary, and the reason is that his daughter works at Winningham Aboriginal Child and Family Centre, and he'll be leaving the chambers for the determination and debate. Next declaration we have is from Councillor Swain, related to item 11.3, Community Resilience Fund, COVID Business Support Package. It's a less than significant non-pecuniary declaration. The reason is that the client of one of the businesses, Councillor Swain, will be remaining in the chambers, will be leaving the chambers for the debate and the resolution. The third declaration we have is from Councillor O'Keefe, relating to item 17.1, and that is related to tender T1920-28 Showground Rodeo Arena construction. It's a pecuniary interest declared, and the reason is that currently one of the tenderers is engaged in private works for Councillor Keith, and Councillor Keith will be leaving the chambers for the day of determination. One final call for any further declarations in relation to our business paper. We'll move right along to item number 7, which is community presentations. There are no community presentations. Item number 8 is the Merrill Minutes. Councillors, you have in your business papers, you have a detailed information in relating to Namoi Unlimited advocacy and leadership position. I won't go through that. It's quite a informative document. I would like to move the motion. I'd like to call for a seconder to the motion that it be accepted and noted. Thank you, Councillor Swain. Councillors, I'll just briefly speak to the register that you have before you. This is an annual reviewed document, strategic document that the five councils involved with Namoi Unlimited have, and it certainly works closely with our strategic activities that we do during the course of that year. I'm happy to take any questions before I put the motion that is before you. So I'll open to the floor. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess just a question. This is something that ties into our own strategic position, but have we done this before? I can't remember anything being as detailed as this before.
So the joint organisation had determined that there are certain documents we would like to send back to each of the 5 councils that make up Namoi Unlimited as information throughout the year. Our member value report is one of those documents that's constructed every 6 months, which talks about the value of being a member, and our advocacy and leadership register is another one that we'll bring back to each council on an annual basis. So you're right, Councillor Swain, this is the first time you would have seen it, but certainly it's about building stronger communication between the regional organisation councils and each member. So there are no further questions, councillors. I'll put that motion on the favour. Against? Motion carried. Moving on to the next item on our agenda, which is the General Manager's reports. I'll call on our General Manager, Mr. Groth, to detail his recommendation, starting with item 9.1, COVID-19 Economic Stimulus Package.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, councillors. This item deals with the requirement for council to complete a funding agreement with the state government for the economic stimulus package. The details are in the report, so I won't labour that, but commend the report and pleased to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Groth. I call for elected member to move the motion. Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Be accepted and seconded by Councillor Swain. Councillor Campbell, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question for Mr. Groth, if I may, please. Noticing dot point 2 in the background, the package currently has 4 elements. The second one, funding to meet council's increase in emergency services levy. As council has not recovered the amount of the levy itself in 1920 through the road system, we budgeted or accounted for this somehow.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Through you, Mr. Mayor. The increase for 1920 has actually been fully covered by the state government also. So that was covered under a previous commitment by the state government. And what the current funding deed or the funding deed in front of us deals with is the 2021 component. What is still as yet unknown is what the impact on the 21-22 period will be, whether there's any carryover and increases into that period. I have raised a question through the OLG with respect to that, and they've passed that question on to emergency services to come back with a response.
Thank you.
If I could just quickly add to that question, Councillor Campbell asked the General Manager, assuming that it is in line with our standard increases, would we have budgeted for that ESL payments to be made in the upcoming?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and through you, no, we certainly haven't budgeted for that. So the additional $95,000 in ESL increase will be offset by the subsidy by the state government. The requirement is the council actually makes that payment and we rebate it by the oscillator benefit for an equivalent amount.
Now call for any elected member who'd like to ask a question or speak against the motion. Councillor Swain, as the secretary of the motion, wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Be the case, so now I've put the motion. All in favour? Against? Okay, that carried. Moving on, item 9.2, COVID-19 endorsement of urgent works. And I'll hand back to Mr Groff to detail his recommendation.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and again through you. Councillors, this item deals with expenditure incurred by council under the preparation for our services in a number of elements to be reopened to the public. So under delegation, I have authorised the expenditure of a certain amount up to $10,000. In the report, it details that we have actually incurred costs of $10,000 to date. I apologise and wish to correct that information. That was put in there as a placeholder, and given that I haven't got back to council since writing the report, it's remained in there as such. The actual amount spent to date is $4,000. However, there may be some further expenditure incurred in terms of meeting requirements with COVID-19. So I still recommend the council, if you're of the mind, to approve a budget of $10,000 to allow any further expenditure required.
Thank you, Mr Groff. I'll now call an elected member to move that motion. Thank you, Councillor Luke. And seconded by Councillor Fuller. Councillor Luke, do you wish to speak to the motion?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Now call for elected member who'd like to speak against the motion and ask a further question. Councillor Fuller is the second to the motion.
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Be the case, put the motion. All in favour? Against? The motion carried. Moving on, item 9.3, Assistant City and Friendly Relationships Program. I'll hand back to Mr Groff to detail the recommendation for.
Councillors, this item is concerned with the Assistant Cities and Friendly Relationships Working Grant and the program under that group. It's a lengthy recommendation, so I'll spare you and the listeners at home reading through it, but essentially it recommends the approval of two amounts, $5,000 towards Two Cats Creative for the exhibition of Sirens of Gunnedah, exhibition in Lane Cove, and St Mary's College for an excursion of 12 students and 3 staff members to the Changzhou Middle School in Ningbo, China. The remainder of the recommendation essentially deals with carrying over the balance of funds to the next financial year for the purposes of those detailed in the report. The report is available on Council's website for those listening.
Thank you, Mr Groff, for that call.
I move for adoption of the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Hasler, and is seconded by Councillor Moses. Councillor Hasler, wish to speak.
I just add that the money is rolled over in 3 in case it's most likely those 2 events won't be able to take place this year. If they do go ahead next year, they will be funded. And the bottom we have also recommended that a Shire Gunnedah Shire band, depending on availability, go down to Lane Cove to recognise the very good support that Lane Cove gave us during the drought, and both in funding and in kind, and to authorise 2 members of the working group to attend that opening. Also, Sirens, in recognition of that close relationship we've had with Lane Cove for many years.
Thank you. I now call for elected member who'd like to speak against the motion and ask a question. Councillor Swan.
I'm going to take a liberty, Mr Chairman, not asking a question, but just making a point. The last time the Gunnedah Shire Band went to Lane Cove to perform at a concert, there was very severe bushfires around about Singleton, and the bus got so far down the highway and had to turn around and come back, and the kids arrived about half an hour late at the concert hall and had to step off the bus and then step straight up onto the stage. So they did a mighty job there. So it'll be interesting to see whether they're happy to go again this time, as long as we can ensure there's going to be no hold-ups. So I wish them well.
Thank you, Councillor Swan. Councillor Moses is the secretary of the motion. Wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Call for any further questions or councillors that would like to speak against the motion before I put the motion. That be the case, I'll put the motion on favour. Against? The motion carried. Moving on to the next item is Director of Corporate and Community Services Report. And I'll thank the General Manager for his content into our June meeting. And I'll call on Mr Muldoon to detail his recommendations starting at item 10.1, 2019-20 capital rollover, civic movie screen replacement, sound system upgrade and library computers.
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. The three items there mentioned are to be rolled over due to COVID experiences and suppliers having issues. We're unable to complete those in this particular year, but they are of an important nature. The one that the sound system upgrade will actually be used for some repairs to the stage. We haven't got to a point where we can align a builder and an engineer in what is required. However, an additional report will be presented to council in the future. That particular item will be put in the budget for the following year. We'll be able to get through to that following year based on the current system at the moment. It just won't be as exceptional as your new system. I'll put the recommendation to the council's consideration.
Thank you, Mr Muldoon. Now, the elected member to move. Thank you, Councillor Luke. And seconded by Councillor Swain. Councillor Luke, you wish to speak to the motion?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Now, call for elected member who'd like to speak against the motion or ask a question. Councillor Swain is the second of the motion. You wish to speak?
No, thanks, Mr Mayor.
That be the case, councillors. I'd like to put the motion on in favour. Against? The motion carried. Moving on to item 10.2 arts. At this point, we have one declaration of interest. It's pecuniary, and Councillor Moses will be leaving the room. So, Ms Markey, please have the record show Councillor Moses as elected changes. Councillors, this next item is in relation to the arts and cultural grant funding panel outcomes. I'd like to hand back to Mr Muldoon to detail the recommendations of the report.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and through you. The subcommittee met and reviewed the 8 applications for funding under this grant program, and through discussions come up with a selection as tabled in the table in that report, and that's what would be council would be approving if they voted for that selection. So I put the recommendation to the council for their consideration.
Thank you, Mr Muldoon. Thank you, Councillor Luke has moved the motion. Sorry, Councillor Fuller has moved the motion. Councillor Hook has seconded the motion. Councillor Fuller, do you wish to speak to the motion?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
I'll now call for elected member who'd like to ask a question, speak against the motion. Councillor Hook is the second of the motion. Do you wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
That be the case then, councillors. I'd like to put the motion on in favour.
Aye.
Against? The motion carried. Councillor Fuller, would you mind asking Councillor Moses to answer the change? Ms Markey, could you please record show Councillor Moses has rejoined the council? Councillors, we'll now move on to the next item, which is item 10.3, outstanding resolution register. I'll hand back to Mr Muldoon to detail the recommendation.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and through you again. The outstanding resolution register is detailed as an attachment to the report, and the information, the recommendations for information. I'll put the recommendation to council.
Thank you, Mr Muldoon. I'll now call for elected member to move the motion. The recommendation that reads that the information be received and noted. Thank you, Councillor Swain, and seconded by Councillor Hook. Councillor Swain, who wishes to speak to the motion.
No, I don't think so, Mr Mayor. I was trying to find something, but I think I was happy to get after I read through it more closely. Thank you.
Councillor Swain, we'll now call for elected member who'd like to speak against the motion, ask a question. Councillor Hook.
I'll note with excitement for the economic development team that are here in the room with us. The second oldest item on the register is being dealt with tonight.
I'll now like to ask Councillor Hook as a second of the motion. You wish to speak to the motion?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm happy.
That be the case, then councillors, I'd like to put the motion on the vote. Against? Declare that motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Muldoon, for your contribution to our June ordinary meeting. The next item on the agenda is the Director of Planning and Environmental Services report. And I'll call on Mr. Johns to detail the recommendations, starting with 11.1, which is 2019-20 capital rollover, Gunnedah impound facility upgrade design phase.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and through you, as council will be well aware from this report, we're seeking to roll over $80,000 from this project from the current financial year to next financial year. The main reason for that is we geared up to commence works in relation to the design phase of the impound facility, and due to COVID, we were able to have consultants come in and do that work. So we're looking to start that in the new year with restrictions eased.
Thank you, Mr. Johns. I call for elected member to move the recommendation. Comes the motion. Thank you, Councillor Fuller, and seconded by Councillor Moses. Councillor Fuller, do you wish to speak to the motion?
No, thanks, Mr Mayor.
Now I call for elected member. Would like to speak against the motion, ask a question. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I was just going to ask of Mr Johns whether there would actually be consultation with expertise within the community, such as veterinary clinics and the RSPCA, to so that there is some engagement with people who are sort of stakeholders and have expertise when that project gets underway.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Luke, for the question. Generally, we'll aim to develop the new facility to meet standards that are set by state government. In saying that, I don't believe we've gone down the path of the communications plan this project just yet that had involved that type of consultation, but in saying that, I'll be happy to take that back to the Reg Services team and have a discussion about that and get back to it.
That'd be great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Luke. Councillor Moses, the second of the motion.
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Are there any further questions or comments, councillors, before I put the motion? In case I put the motion, all in favour? Against? Declare that motion carried. Moving on, item 11.2, Gunnedah Shire Community Workforce Plan. And I'll hand back to Mr. Johns to detail the recommendation report.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and through you. This report seeks council endorsement to exhibit the draft Gunnedah Shire Workforce Plan. So the plan aims to positively impact the skilled labour shortage we've been experiencing here for some time and expect to experience in the future. Obviously, this is a step change, I guess, in the way we've been dealing with the issue. The plan has been developed in consultation with various internal stakeholders. We have had a couple of councillors raise some drafting errors that we've identified. Thanks to those councillors, and they'll be corrected prior to document going next edition. Commend the report to you. Thank you for taking questions.
Thank you, Mr. Johns. Can I call on elected member to thank you, Councillor Hook, and seconded by Councillor Chief. Councillor Hook has moved the motion. You wish to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just very briefly, I'd like to thank the officer and the staff for developing this document. I think it's a far-reaching document. It's going to serve us well into the future. I think it sets a very, very good blueprint for our workforce and where we're likely to go into the future. And I commend the public to actually have a good look at this document and to provide the necessary feedback. I think is appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hook. I'll now call for elected member who'd like to speak against the motion or ask a question. Councillor O'Keefe is the second of the motion. You wish to speak.
Mr Mayor, just briefly to echo Councillor Hook's gratitude for the effort and the work that's gone into the document and commend it to the general public and say get behind this and have a good look at it and give us your feedback. Really is a good blueprint and roadmap for where we need to go as a town.
Just before I put this motion, councillors, I too would like to echo both comments that have been made. Our community is changing and evolving all the time. I think this workforce plan certainly talks to the issues of today, but it's forecasting what they'll be for tomorrow and into the future. So it's great to see council on the front foot with this document, and I look forward to when it's endorsed and we can start to move forward with some actions. In saying that, councillors, I would now like to put the motion on the table. Against? Declare that motion carried. The next item on our agenda, we have a declaration, I believe, from Councillor Swain, item 11.3, which is Community Resilience Fund. Councillor Swain will be leading the chambers for the debates and the determination. Ms. Martin, you could please record the fact that Councillor Swain has left the chambers for the determination. As I said, councillors, item 11.3 is Community Resilience Fund, COVID-19 Business Support Package, Business Partner Program, and I'll hand back to Mr. Johns to detail the recommendation report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, this report seeks endorsement of the recommendation of the Business Partner Program Advisory Group, who met recently to deliberate on a number of applications in relation to our Special Business Partner Program COVID round. The advisory group recommends a total of 22 applications be endorsed at a value of more than $32,000.
Thank you, Mr. Johns, and our call. Thank you, Councillor Luke has moved that motion, and it's been seconded by Councillor Moses. Councillor Luke, do you wish to speak as the mover of the motion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I wanted to pay tribute to the staff members that support. I am the chairperson of that working group. The staff members that support these business partner program rounds. There's a lot of research that goes into it, but also especially the members of the working group. It is quite an arduous task to actually give the right amount of time to these applications, and the members of the working group do a lot of reading beforehand. There's a lot of information that goes with these applications, which are certainly made easier by the work of the staff members. So, yeah, a lot of hard work and some very good applications for this round of funding. So thanks to all.
Thank you, Councillor Luke. I'll call for elected member who'd like to speak against the motion and ask a question. Councillor Moses, as the seconder of the motion, wish to speak.
I just want to echo what Councillor Luke said. They're all good nominations and the staff are fantastic.
Thank you, councillors. I'd now like to put the motion. All in favour? Against? Declare that motion carried. Mr. Connery, if you could please ask Councillor Swain to rejoin us in the chambers. Ms. Markey, if you could please let the record show that Councillor Swain has now re-entered the chambers. Councillors, will now be moving on to item 11.4, which is Camper Van and Motorhome Club of Australia proposed recreational vehicle park, and I'll hand back to Mr. Johns to talk through the recommendation in two parts you see before you.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you, this report relates to a request from the Camper Van Motorhome Club of Australia. It's come through us in the last month or two. Councillors will recall a couple of workshops with Mr. Constable from that organisation giving us a bit of background on this proposal. Essentially, the proposal is to this organisation to lease at this stage for 5 years with a 5-year additional option some grounds down on Maitland Street and Chandos Street, which is just north of the CBD towards the river. Essentially, the report and the EOI that was received from the CMCA highlights there's a segment of the tourism market that we are missing in our shire, mainly because there's a cohort of travellers that are self-sufficient, and generally they'll stay in free camping areas rather than caravan parks. So this gives, I guess, an opportunity for us to open up our shire to a whole new cohort of travellers, and our hope is that those travellers will come to the town, come to our shire, spend money in the town. The report recommends that council endorses the MOU and also any requisite leases that would be required as a result of signing that MOU. But it is important that the development would be subject to a development application. But we have spent some time with the CMCA and their representatives in relation to permissibility issues and things like that. So I don't foresee there to be any significant issues with that. But it is a process that must take course. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Johns. Councillors, before I call for a mover of the recommendation to become a motion, Ms. Markey, could you please let the record show that Mr. Connery joined our council meeting at 4:57, please? Councillors, I'd now like to call, thank you, Councillor Hasler has moved the recommendation to become a motion. I'll now call for a second at council. Councillor Hasler, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, I will, Mr. Vincent, because I think it's a very important development for our community. It will provide improved accommodation offering, which is part of our destination management plan objectives. And it will cater for, as Mr. Johns alluded to, a large group of the self-contained vehicle travelling market, which no longer wants a commercial site per se. And we would only have to go on. I went to drive out to Kelvin on Friday, but over the bridge, and there were 9 vehicles parked in the area immediately on the northern side of the bridge as an example of the potential market we're talking about. It's the location itself, it's a scenic location, it's near the river, and Woolshed Reserve and Dolly Fields close by, and also not far away, and with his place. And probably most importantly, it's close to the shopping centre within walking distance, because most of these people are driving large vehicles and they don't want to drive a vehicle around. They can walk up to the shops, and so there will be a significant economic benefit to our community by the potential shopping. So I was pleased to see that tomorrow, the initiative, they opened theirs earlier this year. It didn't come, it's not a very good time to be opening with COVID, of course. So they haven't been inundated up until now, but they've already created theirs. They're in a very similar position to us. They have a commercial park owned by the council itself. They also allow free camping at the Heritage Railway Station, and they also have a showground where people can camp. And so now they've got their CMCA facility as well. So they've seen a similar need and gone down that path. I think it's an ideal development in an excellent location, and hopefully see it. I'm sure that Mr. Johnson will have an operation by the end of the year, so that's a good target.
Thank you, Councillor Hassel. Now call for elected member who'd like to speak against the motion or ask a further question. Councillor Hook is the second of the motion. You wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I'd just like to echo what Councillor Hassel has to say, but also to point out to people that might not know, people in the public, that the CMCA group is a group with the highest integrity, and I think we can have confidence that if they're developing something in this community, it will be not only a benefit to their members, but also a benefit to this community. And I'm really looking forward to the economic stimulus that that's going to bring to us. So thank you very much for the opportunity, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hook. Any further questions or comments? Councillor Hook.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know we're not at the DA stage, but I wondered whether the owners of the block on the corner where the dwelling is have been consulted by any of the interested parties as to whether that might be something that they have an issue with or a view on.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, through you. Thanks, Councillor, for the question. At this stage, we haven't. The reason for that is that I think this council needs to make a decision on whether it was a project that it wished to support. There are a number of development application issues that we were talking to Mr. Constable from CMCA about, and I didn't see any point in delving into those without the support of the room, I guess, the councillors. So our plan would be for the regular community participation plan actions to follow at DA. But I probably would be encouraging the CMCA to do their own consultation prior to that being lodged. I guess the other point to matter is that the other point to raise that's important is that we have looked at that feasibility, so there's no real issues with the proposed use in that space. So it's one of those things that the LAP permits it. There's an expectation that will be compatible in the vicinity of the where you like out.
Thank you.
Councillors, just before I put this motion, I'd like to make a comment to Mr. Johns. Congratulations on the quality of the report that was put before councillors as well. It's very well detailed, very clearly articulated position. So congratulations to yourself and the team. Councillors, in saying that, I'd now like to put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declare that unanimously supported. Thank you. Item 11.5, which is the investment prospectus, Invest in Gunnedah, is the next item on the agenda, and I'll hand back to Mr. Johns to detail the recommendations before you.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you, councillors, it gives me great pleasure to bring this report to you. Thanks, Councillor O'Keefe, for pointing out this was that had been on the standing resolution for some time. But I can say there's been a great deal of work done on this project, over more than the last 12 months. I guess it's the latest tool in our armoury in terms of really showcasing Gunnedah as a place to invest. And I think it's a very eye-catching document, and I think it will do well for us. Happy to take any questions in relation to the document.
Thank you, Mr. Johns. I call for elected member to move the recommendation become a motion. Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe, and seconded by Councillor Swain. Councillor O'Keefe, you wish to speak to the motion.
Mr. Mayor, obviously I'll expand on my joke earlier and say that I'm incredibly happy to see this coming before the council. I believe the wait's been worth it. It's a fantastic document. It reads very well. And more importantly, as the director indicated, it really will advertise, the land of opportunity that we are at Gunnedah, and work really hard to, attract and steer investors in the right direction of what you can achieve in Gunnedah. So commend to everyone. I'm sure there won't be any opposition in the room, so I won't argue too hard, but I do encourage us as an organisation to promote ourselves and promote this document quite aggressively.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Do I have a councillor who'd like to speak against the motion or ask a question? Councillor Swain is the second of the motion. Wish to speak to the motion?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
That being the case, Councillor Luke, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. On some of the little mud maps, there doesn't seem to be a huge amount of detail. I know they're just little snapshot maps about even rail travel, and that there aren't necessarily lots of detail, but there are other ways of travelling to and from Gunnedah, or even possibly the purported, or what we expect to have with the Northern Inland Railway, which seems to be a bit missing from this document.
Thanks, Councillor Luke, through you, Mr Mayor. I guess the purpose of an investment attraction document is to really catch the eye, and we could write a tone of all the wonderful things there are about Gunnedah and the reasons why one should invest in the town, I guess. But the purpose of it is to be an eye-catching document to encourage further inquiry. So I'll certainly take on board your comment, Councillor Luke. I guess the purpose of it is to really just lure them in and then have them do more research on our website, and then actually come to Gunnedah, knock on the door, and give us a call.
Councillors, before I put this motion, I too would like to add my support. We're in a very competitive marketplace for investment. We understand that, unfortunately, because of COVID and on the back of 3 years of drought in our community, and the fact that the nation's now in recession officially, we've heard, we're in a very competitive marketplace if we're looking to grow jobs and opportunities well into the future, which we know, as a group of elected members, is a high priority of this council. A lot of work has been put into our branding in previous times, which has been rolled out in other activities within our economic development team. I see this document as the next stage, a very important step in us being able to promote and put ourselves above many other local government areas when it comes to attraction of major investment that we're after. So I echo the comments of my fellow councillor and Councillor O'Keefe in my support of this document. And it's now, once it will be endorsed, which I hope it will be shortly, incumbent on us all to make sure that we get full use from the document. In saying that, councillors, now I'd like to put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Unanimously supported. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is item 11.6, electronic event signs, and I'll hand back to Mr Johns to detail the recommendation report.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Through you, Council's request, this report outlines a range of options in relation to the provision of new electronic event signage for the town of Gunnedah. Following from our workshop back in earlier this month, we've come up with 3 new recommendations or options rather. So we went from 8 or 9 at that workshop down to 3 that are before you today. We are recommending option 3, which proposes 3 new double-sided signs at each of the Tamworth, Narrabri and Coonabarabran entrances to the town. We happy to take any questions in relation to that.
Thank you, Mr Johns. I'll now call for elected member to move the recommendation. Councillor O'Keefe, seconded by Councillor Luke. Councillor O'Keefe is moving the motion, Mr Speaker.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I felt I should move this motion as possibly the councillor that's been the annoying one trying to drive this project forward and drive us into the 21st century of electronic event signage in Gunnedah. And whilst the links to the previous item are not always obvious, for me this is really about driving the presentation and the attractiveness and the utility of certain aspects of our town into the 21st century, and driving that coordinated, cohesive approach, the vision, and putting that on show and go to other regional towns. And I'm specifically referring to, quote unquote, some of the big boys of the region, like Tamworths and Dubbos. You have this professional approach. it's linked. This project and option 3 is written is really getting the job done once, getting it done right, and providing what will be over a decade of solid utility to our community in terms of advertising and ability to present a united front to visitors to our town and locals alike.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. I now call for elected Councillor Haslett. You'd like to speak?
Yes, I would, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to move the following amendment. That council defer a decision, and I'll pass it on. The council defer a decision on implementation of the electronic event signage until a report is provided featuring costs for 2 signs only, both for one-sided and two-sided signs, one of which would be located at the eastern approach to Gunnedah, while the other would be located in the CBD, possibly Wilfley Park near the playground. I have a seconder, and I'm happy to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Haslett. Do I have a second? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Ford. Councillor Haslett.
Mr. Chairman, I do so reluctantly in some ways because I do support us having new signage. What I don't support, and it's been brought to my attention by a number of people in discussing this, is that they said, well, who's the market for it? Why are we putting 3 signs up only for the tourist or the through traffic? If we've got people coming down Rendezvous Road, you've got people coming down to where I live, you've got people coming in from Kelvin and so on, won't see a sign. The only way you'll see a sign is if you're leaving our perimeter. And they point out to me that without a newspaper and limited things, and they say, I'm not quite, I won't make too much comment on that, but they say it's difficult to find some information on our website. But we need this advertising in the centre of town to get to a maximum number of people. I would suggest that 50% plus of our population won't see this unless you live in town. A lot of people don't leave town every day, like the workers that go out to the mine site or whatnot. Not a lot of people don't even leave town once a week. So why don't we put a sign where they'll see it when they go shopping, or where they take their kids down to the park, or town hall, or Libby's place, something in that vicinity. So that's the sort of message. The other thing is that I find difficult in supporting it is that we've gone from 35,000 in the budget to 160,000, 66,000 unbudgeted. We're going to the general fund. I don't support that general principle of doing that unless it's really, really shown to me that it's needed. And having 3 signs up on the perimeter of your community, I don't believe it is the justification for 166,000, an extra 91,000 above what we can make available without going to the general fund. So I'm happy to see possibly 2 signs go up. We need some more information about how much it's going to be, whether it be a one-sided sign or a 2-sided sign. And then I believe I fully support probably that situation, but I can't support 3 signs on the perimeter of town, missing a large number of our targeted our community and not being able to see it. And secondly, calling for 91,614 from the general fund when we haven't budgeted it previously, and we've already expanded the figure from what we had. So, as I say, repeating, happy to have 2 lots. I would also point out that there are other methods of attracting people into communicating what's happening in the community. The report I gave for the tourism conference at Albany, they are using projectors inside the building on their windows as another means of technology to get this sort of message across in the centre of their community or wherever their building is. So I think there are possibly other ways we can look at it. But as I said, happy to support 2 probably, but certainly won't support 3 and an extra 91,000, some 130 plus thousand above the budget.
Thank you, Councillor Haslett. Councillors, as you're aware, we need to deal with the amendment as a priority. I will, before I call for any further debate, I will ask the Director, Mr. Johns, the amendment we see before talks about costings of 2 signs, or either both single-sided or double sided, are we, I know there are many options that have been discussed. Are you in a position to talk about that price now rather than wait for a further report to come?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, through you. Essentially, councillors, the information's in the report. There are some site-specific extra costs, like the sign on the proposed container, for example, has some issues with power supply. But generally speaking, if there's power supply nearby, which is the case for some of the sites, so this is thumbnail bit in touch stuff, it's about $40,000 for single-sided sign and $57,000 for double-sided sign. So even though those options weren't the option that Councillor Hasler has foreshadowed explicitly listed in the report, the numbers that you need are essentially there.
Councillors, I'll now open up for elected member who'd like to speak against the amendment before you ask a question. Councillor Aitken.
Look, I will speak against it. I will speak against the amendment, I guess for a few reasons. The first point I'll raise is that, you know, councillors were the beneficiary of quite a lengthy workshop on this subject probably a fortnight ago, if I'm correct, where about 9 options were put in front of us, including an option that's almost exactly what Councillor Hasler's amendment is asking for in return, with the exception of Wolseley as a location, which I'll deal with in a second. And it was clear will of the room at that stage not to pursue anything other than the option which has been recommended and is moved in the original motion here. And we did spend some time going over this and some of the data and the science and the facts behind it in terms of single signs versus double direction signs and the locations. Dealing specifically with the Wolseley Park, particularly in Livy's Place, that's actually a location I personally have a lot of sympathy for and would keenly explore. But essentially the staff have done quite a good job of, through data and research, convincing me not to explore that option initially based on traffic data. And essentially, you know, that section of Condilla Street doesn't feature in the big hitters in terms of traffic movements per day. So in terms of bang for buck and where the traffic count comes from, you know, we're actually hitting the 3 highest localities for traffic count. Yes, a lot of it is through traffic, and I do understand Councillor Hasler's point that a lot of our residents won't on a daily basis travel through there, but the majority of our residents will travel through there. And clearly the numbers indicate such quite regularly. And the other point I will make too is Councillor Hasler did, in one sense, answer some other solutions to the problem raised in terms of advertising and branding and getting things well publicised within the CBD that could be explored apart from this option. The final point, just talking on the finances, I guess that $35,000 budget allocation, I would nearly call a zombie budget allocation. It's been, it existed prior to my election to council in 2016 and has been rolled over every year since. And in actual fact, I've been driving this project to say, you know, it's painfully obvious to myself, and I would hope most others, that $35,000 was never actually going to cut it. It was never actually, it was, you know, my understanding, I've been explaining, spare money left over from another project pushed in this general direction. It was never going to be enough, and that's been well understood. And to be blunt, this project and the expenditure that's required hasn't been tackled for some time, and it's time that it's tackled. And we've spent a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of science into the decision and recommendation that's up there before us. I'd like to see it dealt with. I'd like to see it endorsed as is. And I'd love us to get together and look at how we continue branding and advertisements within the CBD for those that don't drive in and have the main entrances and exits to our town every day.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Councillor Forrest has seconded to the amendment. Do you wish to speak?
No, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I've seconded this motion here for Councillor Hasler for debate. I'm happy to see that we go forward with it, but I still think that Wolseley Park needs something. It is now growing on a daily basis down there, and it needs some good signage for what's on in this community. So that's it. Thank you.
Now call for an elected member who'd like to speak against the amendment. Councillor Hasler, would you like to write a reply?
Yes, I would, Mr. Chairman. Just to make a few comments, particularly in relation to what Councillor O'Keefe stated. I have to point out that the clear will of the room in a working group meeting is not the will of the council. And if there is further information comes to councils in between, as it did in this particular case about what is the purpose of the signs? If they're missing half the population, is it really achieving, particularly for 166,000, what your objective is? I mean, let's look at this so we can get a practical thing which caters for both. And by far and away, we recognise that the eastern entrance to town has the most traffic going both ways. And most people coming through, if they're travelling through Gunnedah from either Narrabri or the opposite highway from Pinnabarron, will go past that sign. So you cover all of those people who are travelling through Gunnedah by having one sign out there. For the local population, you're missing most of them because they're not driving out beyond town limits during the day, most days. And that would be covered with a sign in the middle of town. So all I'm saying is this is the information I've been getting, the feedback I've been getting from people when I've discussed it with them. It's not my idea. Wolseley Park, as I say, to me, particularly when the overhead bridge is open, which it will be within 12 months by more progress by observation, we'll have a stream of traffic coming down from the Wonnerbah Road and then pop into town over that bridge and either up Barber Street or most likely up Connolly Street or else going back the other way. So those people will be in fact passing a sign if it's in the centre of town. Right? So I'm going to take here which part of the centre of town. There may be better crop sites in Wolseley Park. And that's why I'm suggesting we defer it, have another look at it before we make a decision. And I can't say, well, 35,000 might have been small, but that's the figure we had. And we've added 40 from the destination management plan, which makes it 75. And as I said, I know for others around here might be prepared to go to 121,000 for two signs, but that's still 55,000 short of 166,000. And I, as a matter of principle, do not support expenditure of money which hasn't been allocated previously after community consultation or due diligence and discussion had by council. So I don't think we should be locked in. 1 month will not delay the project and getting signs up here expeditiously as possible. So I urge you to look at the deferment for a month until such time as we can look at those things and come back.
Thank you, Councillor Haslett. Now, councillors, to be clear, you see we have an amendment before you. I will be putting this amendment to you shortly. I'll just read that through you very clear on what we're voting for. You've seen the resolution in 3 parts. The amendment that's moved by Councillor Haslett and seconded by Councillor Fuller reads that council defer a decision on implementation of the electronic event signage until a report is provided, preferably to the July council meeting, featuring costings of 2 signs only, both for one-sided and two-sided signs, one of which would be located on the eastern approach to Gunnedah, while the other will be located in the CBD, possibly Wolseley Park near Libby's Place. That is the motion, the amendment that I'll be putting, and councillors are now, by show of hands, likely to, I'll put the motion, those in favour of the amendment. We have 5, and those against, 4, declare the amendment as passed. The amendment now becomes the motion. Once again, councillors, I've read the motion. It is now the motion, so all in favour? I declare the motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Johns, for your information and your support through the June order meeting of council. We'll now move on, councillors, to item number 12, which is the Director of Infrastructure Services report. And I call on Mr. Bartlett to detail his recommendations before you, starting at item 12.1, Office Furniture and Equipment Replacement Program. Thank you, Mr. Bartlett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you, the purpose of this report is to seek council's endorsement and transfer the remaining capital works allocation for office furniture and equipment replacement. So the office building works restricted asset for the purpose of replacing furniture at the completion of that project.
Mr. Bartlett, I now call for elected member to move the recommendation become a motion. Thank you, Councillor Luke, and seconded by Councillor Fuller. Councillor Lewis, you wish to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
I now call for elected member who'd like to speak against the motion or ask a question. Councillor Fuller, as a seconder of the motion, you wish to speak?
No, thanks, Mr Mayor.
That being the case, councillors, I'd like to put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declare that motion carried. Moving on, item 12.2, which is 2019-20 capital rollover, town entrance tree avenues. I'll hand back to Mr Bartlett to detail his recommendation for you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and through you, the purpose of this report is to seek council's endorsement to transfer the unexpended capital project allocation for town entrance tree avenues to the 2021 financial year for the purpose of tree replacement and establishment.
Thank you, Mr Bartlett. And now, thank you, Councillor Campbell has moved the recommendation, which now becomes a motion, and it's seconded by Councillor Moses. Councillor Campbell has moved the motion, wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
I now call for elected member who'd like to speak against the motion or ask a question. Councillor Moses is a second to the motion, you wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
That be the case, I'll put the motion on favour. Against? Declare the motion carried. Moving right along, item 12.3, 2019-20 capital rollover, office building works. I'll hand back to Mr Bartlett to detail the recommendation for you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and through you, the purpose of this report is to seek council's endorsement to roll over the remaining budget allocation for office building works to the 2021 financial year.
Thank you, Mr Bartlett. I'll now call for elected member to move the motion or the recommendation become a motion. Thank you, Councillor Luke, and seconded by Councillor Hook. Councillor Luke, as the member, you wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
I call for elected member who'd like to ask a question, speak against the motion. Councillor Hook is the second of the motion, you wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
That be the case, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Against? Declare that motion carried. Item 12.4, sale of property, 21 Lincoln Street, Gunnedah. I'll hand back to Mr Bartlett to detail the recommendation before you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and through you, the purpose of this report is to seek council's approval to sell the property at 61 Lincoln Street, with the proceeds of the sale to be used for a local housing strategy and subsequent initiatives.
Thank you, Mr Bartlett. Councillors, you see the motion or the recommendation for you in two parts. I'll now call for elected member to move the recommendation to become a motion. Thank you, Councillor Hook, and seconded by Councillor Hook. Councillor Hook, as the mover of the motion, wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
I now call for elected member who'd like to speak against the motion or ask a question. Councillor Luke is the second of the motion, wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor. I think the report explains everything in quite in an effective way, so I'm happy with the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Luke. Councillors, before I put this motion, I'd like to just add my support to the motion that is before us. 61 Lincoln Street is an asset of the organisation has been underutilised and in somewhat disrepair. I see great advantages in selling that land for the sole purpose of making a restricted asset fund available for us to start to look at local housing and the strategy towards how we're going to, as a community, look to better ways for the future with affordable housing and housing requirements for our community as we go forward. So, in saying that, councillors, I'd now like to put the motion in favour.
Aye.
Against? The motion carried. Item 12.5, Gunnedah Airport Operations. I'll turn it back to Mr Bartlett to detail the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and through you, the purpose of this report is to provide council with an update in regards to the council resolution of 8th of November 2019. One important thing to note is that I'm pleased to advise that the submission that's referred to in the second last paragraph of the report that talks about a grant application to be submitted to the federal government for a regional airports grant program for safety and security upgrades. That particular application has been successful.
Thank you, Mr Bartlett. Councillor Haslett moves the recommendation, which has now become the motion, and it's seconded by Councillor Haslett. Do you wish to speak as the mover?
I'm looking forward to the report that the officer refers to. We've been waiting for it for a while, but with the other good news that the Mayor mentioned today about the funding, the late phase may not be so great. We may have greater use of the airport, which will be an excellent outcome, but we've got a way to go yet. So look forward to the report too.
I'll now call for elected member who'd like to speak against the recommendation, the motion. or ask a question? Thank you, councillor.
I probably should have found out the answer to this earlier, but could the officer please tell me what an RPT service is?
Thank you, councillor Lee, for the question. It's essentially a commercial passenger transport. It's basically a
Regular passenger transit.
commercial airline.
Thank you.
Councillor Cook, as the second of the motion, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I actually have a question of the officer. The incoming changes to CASA regulations, could you give councillor a rough briefing on what those might be and what implications that might have for this particular report?
Thank you, councillor Cook, for the question. Through you, Mr Mayor. Our airport will automatically change over to the new system. We will essentially have that accreditation as of the date referred to in the report. However, there is some gap analysis work being undertaken on what is required for an RPT at the moment.
Thank you.
No call for any further questions, or elected member who'd like to speak against the recommendation? In the case of the motion, all in favour?
Aye.
Against? The motion carried. Moving on to item 12.6, contract T1617-03, construction of the Gunnedah Memorial Pool Complex upgrade. Councillor update, and I'll hand back to Mr Bartlett to detail the recommendation in two parts.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and through you. The purpose of this report is to fulfil council resolution of 24th of February 2020 regarding the construction of the Gunnedah Memorial Pool Complex and the investigation into the apparent leak to the Ashworth Golf Course.
Thank you, Mr Bartlett. Now call Councillor Hasler would like to move that recommendation to become a motion. Do I have a second? Councillor Swain. Councillor Hasler, do you wish to speak?
Just to say that thank you for the report. I think it's important that the public is aware of what has happened at the pool and what ramifications it has and what rectification is taking place. And so that's fairly detailed in this report. And many of them, as I've mentioned before, are still aware of the down South Street for the workforce continues, even though I think a little less at the moment. But and so we look forward to the only comment I make is I thought we were informed tonight that future meeting would be in September. But I probably would have said that in September, but it's going to be delayed fair enough. I would expect it to be October at the latest.
I now call for any elected member who'd like to speak against the recommendation or ask a question. Councillor Swain, as the second of the motion, do you wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Be the case, put the motion on in favour? Against? The motion carried. Moving on to item 12.7, bridge renewal program, Orange Grove Road Bridge, and I'll hand back to Mr Bartlett to detail the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and through you. The purpose of this report is to endorse the grant submission made for the replacement of the Orange Grove Road Bridge and to seek council's resolution to contribute $625,175 if the application is successful.
Now call for elected member to move the recommendation become a motion. Councillor Hasler would like to move the motion. Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hasler, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Just to say, I think it's obviously the fact that there seems to be essential work going forward. I'm just in a bit of two minds. We have a wet year. I have to go there for 2.5 years and all that to be underwater for considerable time. Yet on the other hand, I don't like to wish a dry year upon us after the last three. So it's going to be interesting to see when that work's done and whether it gets done without any impediment from water.
I'd like to call an elected member who'd like to ask a question or speak against the motion. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm just wondering if the officer could tell me whether there's a fallback position if the grant submission is not successful. It's then going to be a bit of an open end as to how long possibly that bridge is going to be out of service for the larger vehicles.
Thank you, Councillor Wood, for the question. Through you, Mr Mayor. Should we receive unsuccessful notification of our grant application, we will be back to council with a proposal for how that may be funded.
Thank you.
Councillor Fuller is the second of the motion. Wishes to speak.
No, thank you.
Are there any further questions or comments, councillors, before I put the motion? I'd like to ask one question of the officer, if I may, and that is the contribution of $625,175. It's my understanding that we would be looking for other opportunities for contributions from other parties like the federal government to fill that gap, even though we're making this commitment. If there are other opportunities, we'll look for those as well.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, that's correct. Although this program is a federal program already, so we'll be looking at state contribution should it be available.
Thank you. Councillors, in saying that, now I'd like to put the motion. All in favour? Against? Declare the motion carried. Item 12.8 is our next item on the agenda, which is Canada Conservatorium lease. And I'll hand back to Mr. Barton for the detailed recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, the purpose of this report is to seek approval for staff to enter into a lease agreement with Gunnedah Conservatorium of Music for the space known as the Western Wing at the Gunnedah Town Hall for a period of 5 years, in line with Council's leasing and licensing of Council land and property policy.
Now I'd like to thank you. Councillor Haslett would also like to move that recommendation to become a motion, and seconded by Councillor Fuller. Councillor Haslett, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Just to say, it's great to see the vitality of the town hall with the civic precinct with the conservatorium operating, which in contrast to what it looked like a few years when they weren't there. It's good to also to see their commitment for at least another 5 years and probably beyond. And given our other discussions about the cultural precinct refurb and recognition of additional hiring of buildings that they do in the letter that we've received today. So all told, I think it's probably a good outcome for both the conservatorium and ourselves to have that lease extended for up to 10 years, given they 5 years of option of another 5.
Now I'd like to call an elected member who'd like to speak against the motion or ask a question. Councillor Fuller.
Mr. Mayor, I seconded that motion, but I'd like to ask, with the indulgence of Councillor Haslett, could we have a second dot point to that motion?
Councillor Haslett, your mover has asked for your forbearance. Just for a suggestion.
But okay.
Councillor Fuller.
Okay, so the dot point. Sorry, dot point 2 would be that if the redevelopment of the cultural precedent, then lease agreement would be negotiated in line with the upgraded facilities being afforded for lease.
Councillor Fuller, are you able to confirm the wording on the screen as the second part is correct? That if the redevelopment of the cultural precinct, the lease agreement
Goes ahead, yeah.
It goes ahead, the lease
Or funded, or I'll have to put in there funded.
funded.
Just a little. That the master plan be adopted and funded, that council renegotiate the terms of lease.
Councillor Fuller, I'll just read that. Can you confirm, please, if you're okay with the wording? That if the redevelopment of the cultural precinct master plan goes ahead or funded, that council renegotiate the terms of lease.
What I'm trying to get at is if we get the funding for it, there'll be that extension of that building down there. And I think what I'd like to see that it comes back to council, if somebody might need some more wording on that, comes back to council again to be renegotiated on the lease for them.
Councillor Haslett, as the mover of the motion, your second of the motion has referred to potential word changing before we progress.
I'd like some advice from the officers as to whether they believe that would be legal, or if you've got some beliefs, could you, well, I guess we may be able to forward. I'm just wondering what the objective is. If Councillor Foreman's perhaps suggesting if they get more area, they should pay more.
That's what I get, exactly.
I'll refer to the general manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, thank you for the question, Councillor Hasler. I guess the two parts of the thing at the moment don't sit well together. If you offer the tenant the lease, it would be appropriate to then go back and try and renegotiate that lease post negotiation of the lease. So I guess what councils would need to consider is whether or not we want to offer the lease as been recommended in the first place, or whether we want to offer some variation of that, either for a shorter period or whatever the case may be, or offer a lease contingent upon further developments. But that, I guess in practice that gets quite messy in terms of trying to offer a lease to a prospective tenant. I guess the easiest option would be to look at a different term. Having said that, I have no idea, and I'm not sure what this department does as to whether that would appeal to the conservatorium.
Well, Mr. Chairman, to answer your question, sorry.
I'll just refer to Mr. Bartlett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. As I understand it, the conservatorium is looking for as long-term commitment as what the council can provide reasonably to provide their operation with some security, which is part of the reason why the 5-year term has been recommended to the council.
On that basis, Mr. Chairman, that would be I would not like to hunt the conservatorium away. What we're trying to do is keep them there. And I would see that if we stop down the track that they needed to pay more rent because of if there does habituate the increase building, that's going to be a couple of years at minimum by the time, if we've got the funding and all the work done, that they would renegotiate it then. So I can't accept that as a part of the original story.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller, you are down as the seconder to the motion. Councillor Hasler has spoken to the motion. He's not accepted your additional wording in the motion, so it can't be accepted at this point in time. Councillors, I now call for an elected member who'd like to speak against the motion. Councillor Lou.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And it's a bit of a question, but if the redevelopment does go ahead, does the lease that that we would put in place, does that cater for the fact that their lease of the premises would be disrupted during any building program or redevelopment program? Because that might hold up the works if we get a windfall.
Mr. Bartlett, you able to answer the question?
Thank you, Councillor Luke, for the question. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would need to seek further advice on that.
Councillor Fuller, as the seconder to the motion, Councillor Fuller, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Well, Mr. Mayor, that explains what the General Manager has said. I'm happy to withdraw it, but I would like to know that in the future, should we get that funding and get that cruise that are going down there, that there is some room to spare that for anyone who wants to go into that area down there being able to do so and not be governed by that. I'm all for the conservatorium being there, for sure, but I do want to see there's some flexibility in the future for somebody else that might want to go in there as well, or for the conservatorium to pay more rent on that another area. So that's the reason that I'm raising that with you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller. I'll now call for elected member who'd like to speak against the motion. Ask your question, Councillor.
I was actually going to speak for the original motion, Mr. Mayor, and only to allay some concerns of my fellow councillors. Whilst we do not have the drafted lease document in front of us, a commercial lease would be for a specific facility, a specific square meterage, a specific size. If the facility was upgraded, be it the full master plan or any other upgrade, there was additional area available for lease, that would be subject to the new agreement, and any user would have to pay additional for that. And it's unlikely we would magically infer some benefit windfall on a commercial lease agreement. Secondly, if we were, with Councillor Luke's question, if we were to get a master plan approved and significant grant funding, I'm sure then we will be very keen renegotiating and so with the tenant about organising what that means in terms of breaking the lease to provide the upgrade works.
Councillor Hasler, would you like a right reply? I must clarify, I'm not sure that someone spoke against it, but I will give you the opportunity.
There is some complexity in the information, as pointed out by a couple of speakers, and I would hope that we will be able to resolve this in a sensible way going forward. I don't think the intent from what we got in the letter and people that I've spoken to about conservatoriums, their intent is to stay for as long as possible and rather than move to an alternative site. So if they get a better building at the end of it, they may have to move out for a while. I think that's a reality they'll have to face at some time. So let's see as it evolves.
Thank you, councillors. I think that's adequate debate. Saying that, I'd like to put the motion. All in favour? Against? Declare that motion carried. Moving on to item 12.9 is Namoi Water membership, and I'll hand back to Mr. Barton to detail the recommendation for it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. The purpose of this report is to inform council of a request made by Namoi Water Inc. for Gunnedah Shire Council to voluntarily join.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett. I'll now call for elected member to move the recommendation from the motion. Thank you, Councillor Swain, and seconded by Councillor Swain. You wish to speak to the motion?
Just quickly, Mr. Mayor, yes, I've had a fair bit to do with this organisation over the years. It's an industry organisation. I don't think it's appropriate for council. We have our water our water supply is not tied to I was going to say allocations, that's not quite right, but we're not tied to, sorry, we get first shot of the water. So I can't find another way of putting it, sorry. This hour yes, high security. So I agree with this. I don't think we should be involved in a PIP organisation. Thank you.
Now call for elected member who'd like to speak against the motion. Councillor Hawke is the second of the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that what the officer has enunciated has made it extremely clear the reason why we shouldn't join that organisation, and I support the recommendation.
Thank you, councillors. In saying that, I now put the motion. All in favour? Against? Declare the motion carries. Mr. Barton, thank you for your contribution to our ordinary meeting of council in June. Moving on to item number 13, which is Chief Financial Officer's report. We have one, and that is investments. I'd like to hand over to Mr. Connor to detail the recommendation before you, councillors.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, councillors, I will simply commend the report as put and welcome any and all questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Connor. I now call for elected member. Thank you, Councillor Campbell, and seconded by Councillor Fuller. Councillor Campbell, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I now call for elected member who'd like to speak against the motion or ask a question. Councillor Fuller is the second of the motion. Wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
That be the case, councillors?
I want some more interest, Mr. Mayor.
As we all want, Councillor Swain. In saying that, councillors, I'm going to put the motion. All in favour? Against? Declare the motion carried. And Mr. Connor, thank you for your detailed contribution to our ordinary meeting for June. Moving on, item number 14, reports from committee or two committees. Item 14.1 is Planning, Environment and Development Committee meeting that was held on the 3rd of June. Call for elected member. Thank you, Councillor Swain. And it's seconded by Councillor Fuller. Councillor Swain, wish to speak to the motion? I'll call for an elected member who'd like to ask a question. Councillor Fuller is the second of the motion. Going to put the motion now, councillors, all in favour? Against? Declare the motion carried. Item number 15 is delegates reports. We have one, and that is the Murray Valley Association meeting, which was held on the 20th of April and the 18th of May. Councillor Campbell, did you wish to speak to the delegates reports?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. These will be coming out on a monthly basis from MBA head office and for circulation to councillors. I hope you all like to have a read of them, interesting information in them, and there's a lot in there with links to reports and reviews, etc., that are very noteworthy and quite informative.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Before we move on, I would like to acknowledge the commitment of Councillor Campbell in this particular area, and also congratulate Councillor Campbell on the most recent AGM. Councillor Campbell was elected Chair of Region 11 of the Murray-Darling Association, and this is the second year in a row, so congratulations. Thank you for your dedication on behalf of our community, Councillor Campbell, and I guess this speaks to a previous item on the agenda. We talked about the importance of water, and council are very active in this place, but we're active in the realms of local government and the peak bodies like the Murray-Darling Association and Nemoi Unlimited, those that represent local government and directly have that conduit into state, federal government and other departments. So thank you, as I said, Councillor Campbell, great work, keep up the great work. Item number 16 is
I'll move it.
Yeah, I'll move it. We received those earlier reports.
Thank you. It's seconded by Councillor Hasler. All in favour? Against? The motion carried. Item 16 is notice of motion. Question on notice. There are no notice of motions. Councillors, I'd like to call for an elected member. We're about to go into closed committee to determine items. So Councillor Fuller has moved the motion that we're going to committee to closed committee, and Councillor Hook has seconded. So I'm going to put that motion. All in favour? Against? The motion carried. Councillor O'Keefe. Councillor O'Keefe has a declaration of interest in relation to this item 17.1. Let the record show that Councillor O'Keefe is slowly removing himself from the chambers. Let the record show Councillor O'Keefe has left the chambers for the debate and determination. Councillors, we have one item on our